Wrapping up the week with you here, all things hoops this week on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. We're talking today about the schedule a little bit and how Syracuse stacks up in the conference as well. We're wrapping up our 10 Thoughts series. Can't believe we're already there, Tim. We're going to do that coming up next. Where is Syracuse in the ACC, and how are they going to fare in this really, really tough non-conference schedule? That is coming up next.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in. It's your Friday Locked On Syracuse podcast. I'm Tyler Aki. I'm joined by Tim Leonard, as I am every single day here on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. You can find us wherever you get podcasts, free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube, and we thank you, as always, for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single day. You can also catch us on Twitter at @LO_Syracuse. Today's episode of Locked On Syracuse brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. This is a really fascinating Syracuse season that we're really on the brink of now. What are we, 3-4 days away?
I'm so excited.
By the time people are listening to
here
this
already.
Yeah, by the time people are listening to this, it might be 2 days. It might be the eve. The season may be starting today by the time you're listening to this show. But I think we got to get into the conversation of where Syracuse can finish and how they stack up. I think there's a couple best case scenarios where this team does really well. There's also some worst case scenarios where the bottom falls out on them as well. But let's say you run the simulation here and we get the 75 out of 100 times this is happening, okay? Getting into really the consensus of things. So you look across the country and pretty much any pundit has Syracuse about in that 7th, 6, 7 range, 8th in some spots for where they'll finish in the ACC. And the ACC is certainly going to be better this season. I think if you ask a lot of coaches in the country.
Is it? I don't know. I mean, I'm a little torn on if it's going to be.
But it was
that
bad
good.
last year. Like, it was bad last year. And when I say
why is
better,
it going to be better this year?
Well, you've got better players, certainly, in the conference. I think you look at Duke, notably. And I think the transfer portal treated the ACC very well when you look across the conference. I think of guys like, you look at UNC, Brady Manick, Dawson Garcia. Those are guys that started last season. And in the case of Dawson Garcia, he was a starter as a freshman on a Marquette team last season. You got Jaden Gardner going to Virginia, and then Duke. Right. I mean, not transfers, but they've got one of the best players in the country in Paolo Banchero. So I think the top got really good. Caleb Mills going from Houston, a team that was in the Final Four last season, to Florida State. I think the transfer portal treated the ACC very nicely, and that includes Syracuse when you look at bringing in Cole Swider and Jimmy Boeheim and Samir Torrance. So let's look at where Syracuse might stack up in the conference this year. Just, you run the simulation in your head 1,000 times. Where do you see Syracuse when it's all said and done?
I think 7 is right where I would have them. And most pundits, like you were talking about, when they tier the conference, I was looking at 3-Man Weave. They do a good job.
They do a
fantastic
fantastic
tiering
job.
each conference and previewing, and they have a huge first tier of 6 teams. They all have Duke, Florida State, Virginia, UNC, Virginia Tech, Louisville as the 6 teams above Syracuse. Second tier starts with Syracuse. I kind of agree with that. I think it's going to really be pretty similar to what we saw last year, ACC-wise, where, to me, I don't think Duke is like a top 5 team this year. I think they're probably maybe going to start out as the best team, but I think we're going to have 3 or 4 teams that are ranked in the 10 to 25 range in the AP poll, and it's probably going to be the usual teams like a Duke, like a Florida State. Maybe UNC is a little bit better this year. I'm kind of buying them a little bit more than I have in years past. But to me, it's pretty similar. And Syracuse has been right around that 7-8 range most of the last couple of years. So until they take a leap into the 4 or 5 range, or they exceed their expectations, which they really haven't done a whole lot in terms of regular season play in the ACC, I think I'm just going to keep them in that 7, 8, 6 range.
Yeah, it seems about right. I will say this. The one thing, when I look at the 3-Man Weave tier 1, I think it's a little too big. I think tier 1, it probably should stop after 4, maybe 5. You could squeeze Virginia in there, but I think tier 2 starts with Virginia Tech. And you look at, okay, let's do this little exercise here. Okay. Which teams are definitively better than Syracuse? Which teams are in Syracuse's tier? And which teams are Syracuse definitively better than? Let's start from the bottom here. Which teams in the conference can you say Syracuse is definitively better than? I'm going to go bottom to top here from what I'm looking at. Okay, let's start with Boston College. Syracuse, definitively better than Boston College. I think we can agree on that one, right?
Yes, we can agree on that one.
All right, let's step up another one. Wake Forest. Syracuse, definitively better than Wake Forest this season. They'll see them twice this year. Pitt. Syracuse, definitively better than Pitt. They'll see them twice as well this year.
Yeah. Are we playing Wake twice? I know we're playing BC and Pitt twice, but either way,
Let me
that's
look at the
4
double
wins
ups.
right
I wrote
there.
them down.
Yeah.
The double ups this season for Syracuse: Florida State, Boston College, Pitt, Wake Forest, Miami, Duke. So you'll get double doses of
so that's
those
6 wins.
6
I mean,
teams.
gosh, that's great.
Yeah, I mean,
it
you feel
should be
pretty good about that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep going here. Clemson, Syracuse, definitively better than Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson, I would group in a similar category as like Florida State and Virginia this obviously not from like a talent level, but I guess what I'm saying is Florida State, Virginia, Clemson's roster, you go look at the 3 of them, they don't inspire a lot, but they just sort of have been a little bit better than you'd expect each year. So you have to give them some respect. Like I'd actually say Brad Brownell has been a little bit better than people would even consider. Yeah.
Yeah. Although both him and Brad Underwood will be missing their star centers to start the season. And in the case of Clemson, they're going to be missing their star center the entire season. Amir Sims is gone, which I think is a big loss for them. All right, moving on here. We've got, let's see, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, definitively better than Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I guess they won the ACC tournament last year, but they're not going to be as good this year. They lost a lot.
Losing Moses Wright and Jose Alvarado, your top 2 guys, I think, you and I are in agreement. So we have now knocked off 4 teams that Syracuse is, actually 5 teams, Syracuse is definitively better than so far. All right, next up, NC State. Is Syracuse definitively better than NC State?
This is where I probably draw the line of it's just a similar
so we're moving
type
into
of
the next tier of teams that are sort of in the same league that Syracuse is going to be battling for. You're essentially battling to get out of the first round bye here, right? Or earn yourself a first round bye in this case. I would say, I mean, you're losing some pretty strong pieces here on this NC State team. And you can say the same thing about Syracuse. They lost a couple of key pieces. I just think the Orange did a better job of replenishing than some of these other teams. Sure, you lost Kadari, Allen, Quincy, but you're bringing in a 5-star in Benny Williams. You're bringing in a guy in Cole Swider who's played on NCAA tournament teams and has been a part of championship cultures. You're bringing in Jimmy Boeheim, who has great familiarity. And you're bringing in Samir Torrance, a guy who once upon a time was a top 100 guy. So I think they've done a better job of replenishing than an NC State. I wouldn't say definitively, but I would say significantly better than NC State.
I will put it this way. If NC State is better than Syracuse in the ACC regular season this year, that would not shock me, right? So I don't think I can definitively say that. This is what it comes down to for me. Syracuse is in the same tier they've been in for the last 6-7 years. And I think you're kind of overthinking it if you think it's going to be different this year. Yes, we just talked about all the pieces they've added, but at the end of the day, this is a pretty similar team, makeup-wise and strengths and weaknesses-wise, that it was last year and the year before that. And for whatever reason, they've sort of shifted away from the athletic zone defender types to more of shooting and struggling on defense. And I just don't think you're going to be a top 5 team in the conference if you don't have a top 50 defense in college basketball. And I don't see them having a top 50 defense.
All right. So you're drawing the line there. So NC State is kind of in Syracuse's tier there. I'm going to actually start the tier at this next team with Miami. Miami is coming back with Isaiah Wong, Cam McGusty. I mean, this was a team depleted by injuries last season. And sure, you're losing guys like Chris Likes and Earl Timberlake and Nigel Brooks, but you're bringing in some really talented guys like Charlie Moore, very good transfer, who's on like his 12th team now, playing his 18th season. He's not going to be on his parents' insurance heading into this season for college basketball. But all jokes aside there, Miami's going to be a pretty solid team this year. And then I would group them along with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's one of the sleepers in this conference, actually. A team that I'm gonna say
Yeah,
it,
they're going
Tim.
to be good.
I think Notre Dame could win the ACC. They're like that.
Wow.
They've got that much coming back. And I just think they're a pretty solid team with a lot of ways to beat you scoring wise. They're kind of like Syracuse in a way where they're going to win a lot of games that they probably shouldn't, and they're going to lose some games that they also shouldn't. So I'm going to put Notre Dame in that Syracuse tier. All right. And then you get to Syracuse. Where do you put Virginia Tech? Is Virginia Tech in Syracuse's tier, or are they definitively better than the Orange?
I mean, I can't say it's the same thing for what I was saying about NC State. If Syracuse is better than Virginia Tech this year, I would not be shocked. So I don't think I can say Virginia Tech is definitively better than Syracuse, but I would guess Virginia Tech finishes higher than Syracuse in the ACC regular season final standings. So I don't know if I would necessarily put them in the tier above Syracuse, but I think they're kind of that 6th team and Syracuse is the 7th team.
Yeah, I kind of see it as they're in the same tier as Syracuse, but there's a chance that, I think Virginia Tech will finish above Syracuse, but there is a chance that Syracuse certainly could finish above them. All right, when we come back, we'll get into the teams that are definitively better than Syracuse and maybe dive into ways that the Orange can, and what has to go right for them to surpass this, and best case scenario season on how they can elevate ahead of some of these spots. All right, this episode of Locked on Syracuse is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where families and classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the road team can come to recharge. It's a place you always look forward to, stopping home on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. I heard my roommate talking earlier today. He's going on a road trip. He's like, first thing we're doing, we're stopping at McDonald's. And I said, damn right you are. You're stopping at McDonald's. So head over to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect and get yourself a McFlurry, a Big Mac. The fries are unbelievable. I mean, that is a token of the Tim and Tyler road trip right there. McDonald's, McFlurry, some fries. I'm an M&M guy. You're an Oreo guy, aren't you?
Yeah, I go Oreo. Also, the small fry, it's like, I mean, best small fry you can get. Maybe Five Guys is up there too, but there's just so much in there. I go the small fry with every meal I get at McDonald's.
Yep. I'm going, I always get the fries. You got to get it with the McFlurry. You got to dip them in there. So McDonald's, I'm loving it. Okay, who are the teams that are definitively better than Syracuse right now? And we'll dive into how the Orange can maybe elevate past them in the ACC this season. So that leaves us, I think, with 5 teams here. I think Virginia, Louisville, Florida State, North Carolina, and Duke are all definitively better than Syracuse heading into this season. Do you have any discrepancies with that list?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I don't think this conference is like that scary at the top. And maybe we disagree a little bit on that. I'm looking at KenPom, sort of how he ranks each of the conferences right now. And based on his preseason rankings, which obviously it's kind of just making a guess here.
He admits they're fluky. Yeah.
Yeah. And ACC would be the 5th out of the Power 6 conferences. And they're 0.2 points ahead of the Big East and 0.3 points behind the Pac-12. Then the SEC. I think we can definitively say that the SEC, Big 12, and Big 10 are better than the ACC this year, in my opinion, at least. Florida State is a team that on paper, like they need a big jump from Anthony Polite. Is he going to give it to him? Caleb Mills is a question mark coming over from Houston. How effective is he going to be? Is he going to continue to be like a 6th man for them? They're replacing a lot, right? But they just have proven culture-wise that they are able to finish at the top of the ACC pretty consistently now.
And you get the
Virginia's
jumps. Yeah. There's always the guy that steps up next in line. Terrence Mann.
And Polite
like
seems
every
like
single
that
year.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Raekwon Gray's. Like these guys always take their leaps.
Right. So Virginia, same thing. I mean, they need Jaden Gardner to be good. And I think he will be, but also Jaden Gardner's 6'7", and he can't score outside of 15 feet. So how well is that going to translate to ACC competition and bigger bodies and everything? Maybe 6'8", but he's undersized for a guy that scores a lot inside. He kind of plays like Quincy Guerrier in a way. So I don't know. I just don't think the ACC is going to be much different than it was last year, where we saw that pretty much everyone was beatable at the top.
Here's how I look at it. I think the rankings throughout the season is going to resemble a Big Ten football rankings, where you're going to see 3, 4, 5 teams bunched up between 17 and 25. I think like you look at the profile and the makeup, you might have one team contending for a 1 seed, 2 seed, but when you get into the 17 to 25 range, you're going to see a whole pack of ACC teams, whether it's Louisville, Virginia, Virginia Tech, Syracuse. Maybe they throw their name into the hat at some point this season. You're just going to see a bunch of them there. UNC might be in there at certain points throughout the year. So I think you look at last year, the conference was bad. I mean, Tony Bennett was on an interview and he even admitted as much. The conference was very down last year.
Yeah.
And I think it just by nature, I'm not saying it's going to be an elite conference. I'm just saying it's going to be better. I think you're going to see more teams ranked this season. And will there be a 1 seed? Probably not, but I still think it's going to be a pretty deep conference. I mean, heck, I threw out there that Notre Dame, a team that some people think are 8th or 9th in the conference, could win it. And I truly believe that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just this conference has sort of been slowly trending down, while the SECs, the Big 12s, the Big 10s have been slowly trending up for a while now. I mean, really since 2016, when we had, I think, 6 teams from the ACC make the Sweet 16, and Syracuse was one of them, obviously made the Final Four that year. That was a huge banner year for the ACC. Really, since then, it just feels like a lot of these teams are sort of underwhelming. And now you have Duke and UNC making coaching changes. Duke, not this year, but in the future. And I don't know. I just don't think the rosters on Florida State and Virginia are up there with some of the rosters at the top of the Big 12 and the SEC and the Big 10. So I really think it's going to be pretty similar to what we saw from the ACC in football this year, where a lot of teams are going to be in close games throughout the year because they're pretty similar and no one's separated themselves from the other. And maybe Clemson, the way they started in the top 10 and fell back, could be like a Duke or a UNC this year, because now the way the ACC is in football, there's a lot of teams in the 17 to 25 range, like you were talking about. NC State's been around there in football. Wake is now up to 9. We'll see how they do this week. But I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty similar to how it's shooken out in football.
So let's talk about, again, we don't think Syracuse is going to win the conference. It's certainly BetOnline.ag. We checked before the show. They don't have ACC tournament or ACC champion odds up yet. I'd imagine they probably will at some point before the season gets going. But let's not talk about winning the ACC. Let's talk about getting that first round bye, or the double bye, So getting into the top 4 here. What has to go right in your mind for Syracuse to get that double bye?
The defense has to prove everyone wrong, basically. It has to take a step up from last year. And given the roster construction, I don't really know how that's possible, but maybe it is possible. And maybe they do it. And then Joe is a completely different player from last year, and Jesse Edwards takes a leap. And everything aligns, and Cole Swider averages 15 a game. It's possible. They have talent on this roster. It's just they have offensive talent. And I think in order to be a top 4 team, which is what we're talking about here, a double bye, you just have to be better on defense. And, Mike Waters wrote a great article this week kind of laying out why they've struggled in the regular seasons. And he asked Jim Boeheim about it. And Boeheim was pretty candid in his response. He talked about how the violations were a big part of it. Then him deciding that he was going to leave was a big part of it. But he also said something that I thought that was interesting, where he said, look, like UNC, Duke, Florida State, Virginia, those 4 teams have been up near the top 10 in the country each year. I'm looking at the 6 teams that we're talking about that might be the tier ahead of Syracuse. They'll play 8 games against those 6 teams this year. They play Duke twice. They play Florida State twice. They play UNC on the road. Like, those games are tough to win. And already you're down 5 or 6 losses there. And I think that's what Boeheim was saying, is like, we're not as good record-wise as we were in the Big East, but it's tough when you're going up against those top teams.
That's a good point. I mean, and I completely agree with it. To me, the way that this team earns itself a double bye here, we brought up the double up games. Florida State, Boston College, Pitt, Wake, Miami, Duke. You got to win 9 of those 12. You have to win 9 of those 12. And listen, that's not out of the question either. I mean, you look at BC, Pitt, Wake. I mean, that's the bottom of the bottom there. That should be 6-0. And when you look at it from a season ago, like, you tripped up in some of those games. You coughed up a big lead against Pitt and let them come back and beat you. Those cannot happen. I think Miami's certainly a team that you can take 2 from as well. So right there is 8 very winnable games on your schedule in conference. And then you've got to take 1 of 4 against Duke and Florida State. I think this team's good enough to take 1 of 4 from Duke and Florida State. But it's going to come down to, are you good enough and consistent enough game to game to take those 8 from the bottom of the barrel type of teams? Let's say 6 from the bottom of the barrel type of teams, and then win 3 of Miami, Duke, and Florida State in your 6 matchups there.
It's interesting because I feel like we talked about this a lot last year going into the season, and we've talked about this off the air as well. When you look at Syracuse, they have a lot of three-point shooters, right? In theory, they should be able to beat anyone and lose to teams as well when they have those off shooting nights and just be up and down roller coaster, kind of like that NIT team, maybe. But it's kind of been that way for 3 years now, going back to when Gerard and Boeheim have been like a big part of this team. And for the last 2 years, when you look at their schedule, yes, you just brought up how they blew a game to Pitt, but in general, I feel like they've just kind of beaten who they've supposed to beat and then lost. Business. Yeah, and then they've lost to the top teams. Right. And I remember talking on this podcast last year at times and being like, this is their record against top 50 teams. And this is why these quad 1 wins are what they need to get in the tournament. They don't have enough of them. So I wonder if this is the year where the 3-point shooting actually like that comes to fruition and we see dome upsets with fans again and stuff like that, because it doesn't really make sense that we've just been playing by the book with the roster we have.
And that's what you saw in that 2017 team, right? I mean, you beat 3 top 10 teams that year. You also lost to some pitiful teams too, like a St. John's. So it comes down to, can you find your consistency? Like you said, this is going to be a conference that probably cannibalizes itself in some capacity this year. You got to find yourself a nice little hideout to avoid some of those as much as possible. And that begins with those double up games that you have. I mean, the Pitts, the BCs, the Wake Forest, there's no excuse to not go 6-0 there. If you don't go 6-0 there, you have zero chance of being a top 4 team in the conference. And I think it's an
and then adding in Miami, I would say 7-1 is a must when you count Miami in that fray as well. So that when you do lose to Duke, maybe twice, or UNC once, or Florida State twice. I mean, Florida State at the beginning of the year on the road, that's going to be a tough game. So
I almost don't even count that as like a conference game. And
I know.
Obviously, it counts in the conference record. I get it. But those early season games, the big point of them is tuning up to get you ready. It's almost like the preseason where, okay, there's things you're working out. The ramifications aren't necessarily as big as losing a conference game, but at the end of the day, you are playing against a conference opponent. So it just kind of works out that way. It's kind of, I don't understand really why they do it. It's weird that it's just the one-off game kind of sandwich. And it was really weird a couple of years ago when you opened the season with the conference game. Talk about the stupidest thing that you could do. Have an uber meaningful game.
Night. Yeah.
Have an uber meaningful game in game 1. I mean, this isn't football, guys. Come on.
Yeah, that was a waste of time for sure. And Boeheim made that clear. I'll just say this. I mean, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, and I do think this team has potential to go on an NCAA tournament run again. But until they do it in ACC regular season play, until they get to that double byline, I'm just not going to expect it. I mean, Waters laid out the numbers in that article, 65 and 61 in the last 7 years. That's a good sample size in ACC play. They've been 4 games above 500. So I expect them to probably win 10, 11 games in ACC play again this year and be a couple games above 500.
All right, coming up next, we're going to dive into the non-conference slate because it's a doozy. In fact, I've got some numbers that it is a historic non-conference slate for Syracuse. And that's why you and I are both very, very excited for it. And we thank you, as always, for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single day. And we're back them better than ever because it's BetOnline.ag. They've got a new web interface for the start of the basketball season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. So head on over to their website. They've got an updated desktop and mobile site, and sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. All you got to do is punch in our promo code Locked On to receive that bonus. From basketball, football, baseball, playoffs are over, but you can already get in on some of the action for World Series for next year. They're already ahead of the game, Tim. So go out. I know you're betting on your Red Sox probably. NHL, boxing, UFC, all the way to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for this upcoming basketball season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Also got to tell you guys about the best tasting protein bar on the market. It is, of course, Built Bar. If you haven't tried a Built Bar by now, you are missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but it does not taste like one. You can take it from Tyler and I. We love these bars, and you guys have to try one of these amazing bars yourself to believe it. Most protein bars, they're chalky, they're waxy, they're just plain hard to chew on. A Built Bar is soft. It's covered in 100% real chocolate, and it is somehow good for you as well. They have so many great, amazing flavors: mint brownie, coconut almond, salted caramel, just to name a few. Double chocolate, one of our personal favorites. And this month only, Built is coming out with new limited time flavors every 3 to 4 days. So check their website often. You don't want to miss out. Go to built.com, use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
All right, let's dive into this non-conference slate because it's fantastic this year. I mean, this is the most excited I think I've been for a Syracuse non-conference slate ever. And there's numbers that back it up. So I dove into it, okay? In the Ken Pom era, they have never played more than 5 top 60 teams in the non-conference. They're going to do that this season once again. They're going to play 5. It's tied for the most since back in 2014. And remember that 2014 season?
Well, they're going to play more than 5, right? Because the battle for Atlantis, too.
No. So I'm including that. The reason why I did 60 as my qualifier. They have 3 on the schedule right now, and then they're going to get 2 more, and the entire field in battle for Atlantis is top 60 in Ken Pom. So that's the way I laid it out here for you. Okay, so they had 5 in that 2013-2014 season, and that was the year. Remember, they started 25-0, so they beat all of them, which just shows how impressive that team was with Tyler Ennis and company. So I'm excited. There's big games left and right. I mean, if you beat VCU, then you're probably playing Baylor, the defending national champions. I mean, there's so much to love about this non-conference slate.
Yeah, and I was looking at it. So VCU's the opener in battle for Atlantis. Let's assume they win that. VCU's 98 on Ken Pom. You never know. But and then let's assume Baylor, who is 4 on Ken Pom, beats Arizona State, who's 58. So at that point, you're probably looking at a run of Baylor, then another very solid, probably a top 30 team
like
in
Loyola or Michigan State or Auburn or UConn. That is your group you're picking from. That's all top 35 teams in Ken Pom.
Yeah, and that's 3 ranked teams right there. So back-to-back ranked teams. Indiana at home would be your game after that when you return. It's a quick turnaround, ACC Big Ten Challenge. Indiana's just outside the top 25 in most polls. Then you go at Florida State. They'll probably be ranked. Then you have that neutral site game against Nova. So that's 5 games there in that stretch, hypothetically. And 4 of those will be away from the Dome. All 5, I can confidently say, will come against top 40 to top 50 teams. And I would say Baylor and Villanova, we can confidently say, are national title contenders, like top 10
5
teams.
to 8 teams, yeah.
Right. Florida State, probably a top 20 team. And also, it doesn't get much easier. Like at Georgetown, I know we've been successful against Georgetown. That's another game away from the Dome. So in this stretch, battle for Atlantis plus those 4 games, you're looking at 7 games, or 7-game stretch of 6 of them being away from the Dome. The only home game is Indiana. I think they should beat VCU, but outside of that, it's all like top 50 teams in Ken Pom, no matter what happens in the battle for Atlantis.
And you know my infatuation with the battle for Atlantis, Tim. You know how much I love it. Everyone likes to hype up Maui, talk about the soft rims and the Billy Big Wave, Bill Walton calling your games. But battle for Atlantis is where champions are made. I mean, here, let me lay this out for you, okay? So last year, the entire tournament got canceled. And I looked at the field. Nobody made it out of the second round. So it feels like destiny that things were canceled. The basketball god said, nope, we're not playing this. Maui on the mainland, sure. Nope, we're not doing Battle for Atlantis because it's a terrible field. 2019, remember, that was the year Michigan stormed through the field. They went from unranked to number 3, jumping in the polls. But then, obviously, the NCAA tournament was canceled. 2018, your winner was Virginia. They win the national championship. 2017, your winner was Villanova. They win the national championship. 2016, Baylor, they didn't do much. 2015, Syracuse won it. Remember, great season that year.
Mhm.
They go to the Final Four. 2014, Wisconsin, they won it. They lost in the national championship game. 2013, Villanova, they lose to the eventual champs in UConn. And 2012, Duke wins it. They lose to the eventual champions in Louisville.
Wow.
2011, the field had like two good teams. I don't even think it was on TV. Okay, so we're not even going to count that year. But as you can see, winning this tournament sets you up for some sort of success. You get Final Fours, national championship appearances. I'm not saying Syracuse is going to win the thing. It just shows you're going to go up against some of the best in this field.
Yeah. So let's just have some fun here. Like, what do we think about this non-conference? Like, how well are they going to do in this non-conference schedule, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
In that stretch of games that I laid out, that's where we really find out. I don't really care about the Georgia Tech at the end of ACC play. I mean, that's technically a conference game anyway. But in these early December games, basically, late November, early December, I'm a little scared about it because I feel like it's a tough turnaround to go 3 in Atlantis, then come back home, Indiana, and then go on the road, Florida State. It's just a lot of tough games in a row, and we haven't fared great in non-conference play recently.
Right, and the thing that worries me about Indiana, too, is they're going to be coming off a stretch of cupcakes. Here's what Indiana is leading into you with, all right? Louisiana, Jackson State, Marshall. All those teams outside the top 110 in KenPom. So Indiana is going to kind of get the NFL preseason treatment leading into that game.
They'll be well rested.
They're going to be coming from I think it's a Saturday to Tuesday. It is on the road. That's the great equalizer here in all of this that could help out Syracuse. But here's what I'll say. This team, I think, is going to take care of the games that are against bad teams. Your Lafayette's, your Drexels, your Colgates, your Lehighs, your Cornells. I think they're going to go clean sweep through that. You just got too many good veterans on the team, I think, to fail in some of those games. Then you get into the VCUs. That should be a win, right? I feel pretty confident. And that game, that one is on a neutral floor. Okay, so that game is on a neutral floor. But it's going to be, like you mentioned, that meat of the schedule there. Indiana, whoever you face after in the battle for Atlantis, and Villanova and Georgetown, I think that's going to determine what kind of team this is. I think Indiana, Florida State, Villanova, those three, plus the two final opponents that you have in battle for Atlantis. So that, what is that, a 5-game stretch there. I think I'd be okay with 2 and 3. And if you go 3 and 2, I'm taking you for real.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The thing that scares me, I guess, is the dome is not a factor in a lot of these games, right? It's just Indiana at home.
Yeah.
You got to go on the road, and we'll even count Florida State there. I know that's technically a conference game, but it's all in that stretch for me that I just worry about how well are they going to be at that point in the season? How well is the 2-3 zone going to be doing?
That Villanova game is being played at MSG. We know Syracuse shows up at
that's
MSG.
True. That's a good point.
And Villanova will show up too, but I would say that's going to feel more like a home game than a road game.
Yeah. I will also say, though, that when have we ever won a game?
A much better team.
And when have we ever won a game at Barclays or MSG in the ACC era in non-con? I just feel like we lose all of them. And I've been at every one, I think. So I'm just a little hurt about it.
I know, I was at a couple. I saw the Jalen Carey experience when he had like his only good game as a member of the Orange against the UConn. But no, you're right. They have struggled in New York City, even when the fans have showed up. But if you can go 2 and 3 in that stretch, I'll be happy with it because, and again, 2 and 3 and you beat Villanova and Florida State feels a lot different than 2 and 3 and you beat Indiana, Arizona State, and like it's going to have a very different vibe to it. It depends on what the 2 and 3 is like. You can have a 2 and 3 that feels like 4 and 1 if you beat Villanova and Baylor in that stretch.
Yeah, I just think this is a different schedule than what we played recently. I mean, it's been since Atlantis that we've done a tournament even close to this. Like we haven't been in Maui or anything like that.
You look at it, you got your Lafayette's, Drexel's, Colgates. Then you get into battle for Atlantis, Big Ten ACC, and Villanova, Georgetown, and then you wrap it up with Lehigh, Cornell to close the sandwich there.
Right. It's going to be challenging, man. I think this is a team that does have some veteran guys, but it's new pieces. Jesse Edwards has got to be ready. I'm a little worried that maybe this is just a tough non-conference that lowers the fans' expectations. But I think it's just a tough non-conference that we just have to remain positive through no matter what happens, really. Because like you said, if they go 2-3 in a 5-game stretch, usually that's bad. In this scenario, I might sign up for that right now versus playing the games.
Here's the solace here, okay, is once you get into ACC play, just looking at the Ken Pom projections here. Ken Pom, and again, his early season projections, he says, mean very little, but I just want to lay it out because it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. He has Syracuse in the ACC starting out 7-0.
Yeah. There's
It's
a
a
lot
pretty
of home
soft
games
landing
in that stretch, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty soft landing to open up the ACC. You get Georgia Tech, Virginia at home, Miami on the road, Wake Forest, Pitt, Florida State at home, Clemson at home. That's a pretty soft landing stretch to open up your conference slate.
Yeah, I guess you would have to keep in mind that they'd already have a loss maybe to Florida State on the road in
That is
ACC
true.
play technically. But
These games,
sure,
I mean, they trip me up here.
You're right.
These
It's
early
odd.
conference games.
I think you're onto something, though. And we've seen that, like December 29th through, I feel like we always just play well in January. Maybe I'm off. I guess last year they didn't really play that well. Maybe it's more of a February, March thing.
And that could have been a COVID thing last year, too.
Yeah, I do think we will pick up games in the January, February stretch, almost kind of like that NIT team, and be sort of humming at that point. But I worry about how we look coming out of that gauntlet in the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, it's certainly. And you don't want it to be something that shatters confidence, too.
Exactly.
Because if they have confidence rolling into this ACC schedule, they could start and win the first 7 games of the new ACC schedule after that first Florida State game. If you've got some confidence rolling into that, this could be a really damn good team. And again, this is going to be one of the more exciting seasons since joining the ACC for Syracuse.
Well, we got to figure out and maybe we do this another time, but what's the first must-win game of the year? Is that Georgetown on the road? Like after we've lost a couple, you know how there's always one that's super early that's like somehow, even though we're 5 months away from bracketology, it's a must-win.
I'm going to say Indiana.
that's like even earlier than Georgetown.
Yeah, I'm going to say Indiana. It's a week before Georgetown. Yeah, I'm going to go with the Hoosiers. I think that would be I won't say a must-win. I'll say a statement win.
Yeah.
There. You can really
Trace Jackson Davis, that's a matchup problem for us, for sure.
Certainly. All right, that wraps up 10 Thoughts. A lot of fun. We're going to have our full-fledged season preview out coming up next week on Monday. And then Tuesday, Tim, we're getting you ready for a game.
That's
Lafayette,
unbelievable.
Must win.
What a great time to subscribe to the podcast, right? Just so much going on right now.
YouTube, comment. Comment on the shows as well. We love interacting with you guys. I do want to read some of the YouTube comments because some people have been getting out their thoughts for the season. So we'll do that on Monday a little bit as well. So for Tim, I'm Tyler. Full-fledged season preview coming up next week